St. George's Day from Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia. St. George's Day, also known as the Feast of St. George, is the feast day of St. George as celebrated by various Christian churches and by the several nations, kingdoms, countries, and cities of which St. George is the patron saint, including Bulgaria, England, and regions of Portugal and Spain, which includes Catalonia and Aragon. St. George's Day is normally celebrated on the 23rd of April. However, Church of England rules denote that no saint's day should be celebrated between Palm Sunday and the Sunday after Easter Day. So if 23rd of April falls in that period, the celebrations are transferred to after it. 23rd April is the traditionally accepted date of the saint's death in the Diocletianic persecution of AD 303. The date refers to what was in the calendars of the Lutheran churches, those of the Anglican Communion, and the general calendar of the Roman Rite. The Feast of St. George is normally celebrated on 23rd April. Since Easter often falls close to St. George's Day, the church celebration of the feast may be moved from 23rd of April. For 2011, 2014, and 2019, the Lutheran, Anglican, and Catholic calendars celebrated St. George's Day on the first available weekday after the octave of Easter. 2nd of May 2011, 28th of April 2014, and 29th or 30th of April, respectively. Similarly, the Eastern Orthodox celebration of the feast moves accordingly to the first Monday after Easter, or, as it is sometimes called, to the Monday of Bright Week. The church celebration may also be moved if 23rd of April falls on a Sunday. In England and Wales, the Catholic calendar celebrated St. George on Monday the 24th of April in 2017 because Sunday is the celebration of Christ's resurrection, which is far more important than any saint's commemoration. Besides the 23rd April feast, some Orthodox churches have additional feasts dedicated to St. George. The country of Georgia celebrates the Feast of St. George on 23rd of April, and more prominently, 10th of November, which is on the Julian calendar, which currently fall on 6th of May and 23rd of November on the Gregorian calendar, respectively. The Russian Orthodox Church celebrates the dedication of the Church of St. George in Kiev by Yaroslav in the Wise in 1051 on 26th of November, which is based off of the Julian calendar, which currently falls on 9th of December on the Gregorian calendar. In the Tridentine calendar, St. George Day was given the rank of semi-double. In Pope Pius XII's 1955 calendar, this rank is reduced to simple. In Pope John the 23rd's 1960 calendar, the celebration is just a commemoration. And Pope Paul the Sixth revision of the calendar that came into force in 1969 was given the equivalent rank of a memorial of optional use. In some countries, such as England, the rank is higher. The observances is for church services, flying of the St. George Cross, related to Aragon, Spain, Catalonia, which is in Spain, England, UK, Portugal, Spain observance annually, as is other countries. And the type is called Feast Day, National Day of England, and Aragon. Western tradition. English Catholic and Anglican tradition. The earliest documented mention of St. George in England comes from the Catholic monk, the Venerable Bede, from 673 to 735 AD. His feast day is also mentioned in the Durham Collector, a 9th century liturgical work. The will of Alfred the Great is said to refer to the saint in a reference to the church of Fordington, Dorset. At Fordington, a stone over the south door records the miraculous appearance of St. George to lead crusaders into battle. Early 10th century dedications of churches to St. George are noted in England, for example, at Fordingham, Dorset, at Thetford, Southwark, and Doncaster. In the past, historians mistakenly pointed to the Synod of Oxford in 1222 as elevating the feast to special prominence. The earliest manuscripts of the Synod's declaration do not mention the feast of St. George. The declarations of the province of Canterbury in 1415 and the province of York in 1421 elevated the feast to a double major, and as a result, work was prohibited and church attendance was mandatory. Edward III, from 1327 to 1377, put his Order of the Garter, founded in 1348, under the banner of St. George. This order is still the foremost order of knighthood in England, and St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle was built by Edward IV and Henry VII in honor of the order. The badge of the order shows St. George on horseback slaying the dragon. Froissart observed the English invoking St. George as a battle cry on several occasions during the Hundred Years' War from 1337 to 1453. Certain English soldiers also displayed the pennon of St. George. St. George's Day was a major feast and national holiday in England, on a par with Christmas from the early 15th century. The tradition of celebration St. George Day had waned by the end of the 18th century after the union of England and Scotland. Nevertheless, the link with St. George continues today. For example, Salisbury holds an annual St. George Day pageant, the origins of which are believed to go back to the 13th century. In recent years, the popularity of St. George Day appears to be increasing gradually. BBC Radio 3 had a full program of St. George Day events in 2006, and Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford, has been putting the argument forward in the House of Commons to make St. George Day a public holiday. In early 2009, Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, spearheaded a campaign to encourage the celebration of St. George Day. Today, St. George Day may be celebrated with anything English, including Morris dancing and Punch and Judy shows. A traditional custom on St. George Day is fly or adorn the St. George cross flag in some way. Pubs in particular can be seen on the 23rd of April, festooned with garlands of St. George crosses. Some citation may be needed. It is customary for the hymn, Jerusalem, to be sung in cathedrals, churches, and chapels on St. George's Day or on the Sunday closest to it. Traditional English food and drink may be consumed. Some citation, of course, may be needed. There is a growing reaction to the recent indifference to St. George Day. Organizations such as English Heritage and the Royal Society of St. George have been encouraging celebrations. There have also been calls to replace St. George as patron saint of England on the grounds that he was an obscure figure who had no direct connection with the country. However, there is no obvious consensus as to whom to replace him with, though names suggested include Edmund the Martyr, uh, Cuthbert of Lindisfarne, or St. Alban, with the last having topped a BBC Radio 4 poll on the subject. Recently, there have been calls to reinstate St. Edmund as a patron saint of England, as he was displaced by George some 400 years. Religious observance of St. George Day changes when it is too close to Easter. According to the Church of England's calendar, when St. George Day falls between Palm Sunday and the second Sunday of Easter inclusive, it is moved to the Monday after the second Sunday of Easter. In 2011, for example, 23rd of April was Holy Saturday, so St. George Day was moved to Monday, 2nd of May. The Catholic Church in England and Wales has a similar practice. St. George is the patron saint of the Scout movement, which has held St. George's Day parades since its first years. St. George is the patron saint of many other organizations. In the United States, the National Catholic Committee on Scouting uses the saint for many of their awards and activities. In sport, 23rd April is also the anniversary of the St. George Dragons Rugby League Football Club. The St. George Club coincidentally played their inaugural New South Wales Rugby League first grade match on St. George Day, 23rd of April 1921, at the Sydney Sports Ground in Australia. In Newfoundland and Labrador, St. George Day is a provincial holiday usually observed on the Monday nearest 23rd of April. English festivals, from Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia. English festivals are the Christian and secular festivals that are traditionally celebrated in England. Most festivals are observed throughout England, but some, such as Oak Apple Day, Souling, Rush Bearing, Bombing the Thorn, and Hocktide, are local to certain regions. St. George's Day. St. George's Day, also known as the Feast of St. George, is the feast day of St. George as celebrated on 23rd of April, traditionally except the date of the saint's death in the Diocletianic persecution of AD 303. St. George Day was a major feast and national holiday in England, and on a par with Christmas from the early 15th century. The tradition of celebrations St. George Day had waned by the end of the 18th century after the union of England and Scotland. Nevertheless, the link with St. George continues today. For example, Salisbury holds an annual St. George Day pageant, the origins of which are believed to go back to the 13th century. In recent years, the popularity of St. George Day appears to be increasing gradually. BBC Radio 3 had a full program of St. George Day events in 2006, and Andrew Rosendale, Conservative MP for Romford, has been putting the argument forward in the House of Commons to make St. George Day a public holiday. A traditional custom on St. George Day is to fly or adorn the St. George cross flag in some way. Pubs, in particular, can be seen on 23rd of April, festooned with garlands of St. George crosses. It's customary for the hymns Jerusalem to be sung in cathedrals, churches, and chapels on St. George's Day or on the Sunday closest to it. Traditional English food and drink may be consumed. So let's take a deeper look as to what these are. 1. Morris dance. Morris dancing is a form of English folk dance, usually accompanied by music. It is based on rhythmic stepping and the execution of choreographed figures by a group of dancers, usually wearing bell pads on their shins. Implements such as sticks, swords, and handkerchiefs may also be wielded by the dancers. In a small number of dances for one or two people, steps are near and across a pair of clay tobacco pipes, laid one across the other on the floor. They clap their sticks, swords, or handkerchiefs together to match with the dance. The earliest known and surviving English written mention of Morris dance is dated to 1448 and records the payment of 7 shillings to Morris dancers by the Goldsmiths' Company in London. Further mentions of Morris dancing occur in the late 15th century, and there are also early records such as bishops' visitation articles mentioning sword dancing, guising, and other dancing activities, as well as mumming plays. While the earliest records invariably mention Morris in a court setting, and a little later in the Lord Mayor's processions in London, it had assumed the nature of a folk dance performed in the parishes by the mid 17th century. There are around 150 Morris sides, or teams, in the United States. English expatriates form a larger part of the Morris tradition in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. There are isolated groups in other countries, for example, those in Utrecht and Helmond, Netherlands. The Arctic Morris group of Helsinki, Finland, and Stockholm, Sweden, as well as in Cyprus and St. Petersburg, Russia. The World of Morris is organized and supported by 3 organizations: Morris Ring, Morris Federation, and Open Morris. 2. Punch and Judy. Punch and Judy is a traditional puppet show featuring Mr. Punch and his wife Judy. The performance consists of a sequence of short scenes, each depicting an interaction between 2 characters, most typically Mr. Punch and one other character who usually falls victim to Punch's slapstick. It is often associated with traditional British culture. The various episodes of Punch comedy, often provoking shocked laughter, are dominated by the clowning of Mr. Punch. The show is performed by a single puppeteer inside the booth, known since Victorian times as a professor or punchman, and assisted sometimes by a bottler who corrals the audience outside the booth, introduces the performance, and collects the money, the bottle. The bottler might also play accompanying music or sound effects on a drum or guitar, and engage in back chat with the puppets, sometimes repeating lines that may have been difficult for the audience to understand. In Victorian times, the drum and panpipes were the instruments of choice. Today, most professors work solo, since the need for a bottler became less important when street performing with the show gave way to paid engagements at private parties or public events. In modern shows, the audience is encouraged to participate, calling out to the characters on the stage to warn them of danger or clue them into what is going on behind their backs, as in traditional French guignol. And did those feet in ancient times. And did those feet in ancient times is a poem by William Blake from the preface to his epic Milton, a poem in 2 books, one of a collection of writings known as the Prophetic Books. The date of 1804 on the title page is probably when the plates were begun, but the poem was printed 1808. Today it is best known as the hymn Jerusalem, with music written by Sir Hubert Parry in 1916. The famous orchestration was written by Sir Edward Elgar. It is not to be confused with another poem much longer and larger in scope, but also by Blake, called Jerusalem, the Imagination of the Giant Albion. The poem was inspired by the apocryphal story that a young Jesus, accompanied by Joseph of Arimathea, a tin merchant, traveled to what is now England and visited Glastonbury during his unknown years. The poem's theme is linked to the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 12, and Revelation, chapter 21, verse 2, describing a second coming wherein Jesus establishes a new Jerusalem. Churches in general, and the Church of England in particular, have long used Jerusalem as a metaphor for heaven, a place of universal love and peace. In the most common interpretation of the poem, Blake implies that a visit by Jesus would briefly create heaven in England, in contrast to the dark satanic mills of the Industrial Revolution. Blake's poem asks 4 questions rather than asserting the historical truth of Christ's visit. Thus, the poem merely implies that there may have been a divine visit when there was briefly heaven in England. English cuisine. English cuisine encompasses the cooking styles, traditions, and recipes associated with England. It has distinctive attributes of its own, but also shares much with wider British cuisine, partly through the importation of ingredients and ideas from the Americas, China, and India during the time of the British Empire and as a result of post-war immigration. Some traditional meals, such as bread and cheese, roasted and stewed meats, meat and game pies, boiled vegetables and broths, and freshwater and saltwater fish, have ancient origins. The 14th century English cookbook, The Formulae of Cury, contains recipes for these and dates from the royal court of Richard II. English cooking has been influenced by foreign ingredients and cooking styles since the Middle Ages. Curry was introduced from the Indian subcontinent and adapted to English taste from the 18th century with Hannah Glass's recipes for chicken curry. French cuisine has influenced English recipes throughout the Victorian era. After the rationing of the Second World War, Elizabeth David's 1950 A Book of Mediterranean Food had wide influence, bringing Italian cuisine to English homes. Her success encouraged other cookery writers to describe other styles, including Chinese and Thai cuisine. England continues to absorb culinary ideas from all over the world. St. George Day in England. From Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia. St. George is the patron saint of England, in a tradition established in the Tudor period, based in the saint's popularity during the times of the Crusades and the Hundred Years' War. Veneration of the saint in folk religion declined in the 18th century. Attempts to revive the celebration of St. George Day, 23rd of April, as an expression of English culture and identity date from the foundation Royal Society of St. George in 1894. More recently, since the beginning of the 2010s, such efforts have resulted in St. George Day celebrations with aspects of a national holiday in England. Religious observance. Religious observance of St. George Day changes when it is too close to Easter. According to the Church of England's calendar, when St. George Day falls between Palm Sunday and the second Sunday of Easter inclusive, it is moved to the Monday after the second Sunday of Easter. In 2011, for example, 23rd of April was Holy Saturday, so St. George Day was moved to Monday, 2nd of May, and in 2014, it was celebrated on Monday, 28th of April. The Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales had a similar practice. The history. In history, we look at two parts. The first part is medieval history. The earliest documented mention of St. George in England comes from the Venerable Bede, dated 735 AD. His feast day is also mentioned in the Durham Collector, a 9th century liturgical work, The Will of Alfred the Great, is said to refer to the saint in a reference to the Church of Fordington, Dorset. Early 10th century dedications of churches to St. George are noted in England, for example at Fordington, Dorset, at Thetford, Southwark, and Doncaster. St. George rose to high popularity as a warrior saint during the time of the Crusades, but he had no special identity as a patron saint of England during the High Middle Ages. The saint most closely associated with England until the 14th century was Edward the Confessor. In 1348, Edward III gave St. George a special position as a patron saint of the Order of the Garter, and thanks for his support intervention at the Battle of Crecy. From that time, his banner was used with increasing prominence alongside the royal banner and became a fixed element in the hoist of the royal standard. St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle was built by Edward IV and Henry VII in honor of the order. The badge of the order shows St. George on horseback slaying the dragon. Froissart observed the English invoking of St. George as a battle cry on several occasions during the 100 Years' War, dated from 1337 to 1453. Certain English soldiers displayed the pennon of St. George. St. George's feast day in England was no different from the numerous saints on the liturgical calendar until the late Middle Ages. In the past, historians mistakenly pointed to the Synod of Oxford in 1222 as elevating the feast to special prominence. The earliest manuscripts of the Synod's declaration do not mention the feast of St. George. St. George Day was elevated to a double major feast in the declaration of the province of Canterbury in 1415 and the province of York in 1421, but George was still eclipsed by his rivals, St. Edward and Edmund. The second part of the history period is known as the Tudor period. St. George rose to the position of the primary patron saint of England during the English Reformation with the Revised Prayer Book of 1552. At this time, all religious flags were abolished, including all saints' banners except for his. The first recorded use of St. George's Cross as an English maritime flag, in conjunction with royal banners, dates to 1545. In 1606, it was combined with the Scottish St. Andrew's Cross to form the Union Jack. In his play, Henry V, William Shakespeare has the title character utter a now famous invocation of the saint at Harfleur prior to the Battle of Agincourt, dated in 1415. Follow your spirit. Upon this charge, cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George. At Agincourt, many believe they saw St. George fighting on the English side. The cross of St. George was flown in 1497 by John Cabot on his voyage to discover Newfoundland, and later by Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. In 1620, it was the flag that was flown on the foremast of the Mayflower, with the early Union flag combining St. George's Cross of England with St. Andrew's Saltire of Scotland on the mainmast, when the Pilgrim Fathers arrived in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Services. For the time being, In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, this message, of course, comes from one of the parishioners or priests that I'm reading right now. Continuing on, he says, "We are not holding in-person services. Worshipping together every week is the heart of our parish life. Each of our Sunday services has its own special appeal. Prayer for healing is offered. Come and experience our variety, united by our welcoming tradition of the middle way. Our schedule, as described below or on a PDF document, if you're able to download it, is a typical Sunday between September and May. The schedule varies from this summer during summer service and on select Sundays. So if you see a box at the right on their website, all you do is you scroll down if you don't see a sidebar right, and apparently it contains some current schedule or something. So in any case, that is the conclusion of this very brief part about St. George's Day. Now let's talk about St. George, because it just so happens to be the chosen saint, if everybody remembers, from when I attended RCIA class and was baptized and confirmed Catholic at St. Joseph Catholic Church, Yakima Diocese of Yakima County, state of Washington, here in my country of USA. Because St. George is the saint that I had chosen for my confirmation, then I decided to put something together because I'm not sure if the Queen of England over in whoever may be listening's country has the same, what we call a federal order, where you have to stay at home, you can't go to church or be within 6 feet of people, even if you have a mask on. So I send warm greetings to all of you who might be listening over in England, UK. I know, I wish I could hear you guys. I do have hopes to one day seeing what it'd be like to emigrate to your country. It'll be history in the making. First time American Englishman. I wonder if Peter Dinklage, what to think of that. It might be kind of interesting to get his comment on. Anyway, I just want to say warm greetings to everyone. Hope you are doing well. And I wish you all the best. I think the tradition says, even though I haven't seen the Queen of England since I was 12, and that was back when she visited the United States back then. God save the Queen. Well, yeah, of course, because of this corona flu crap that's going around. So, in any case, I also send warm greetings to Peter Dinklage and his family, Kit Harington, his wife and family, and Natalie Dormer, all the cast of Game of Thrones, including, yes, the Mother of Dragons, Emilia Clarke. Hope her and her mom and brother are doing well over there. So I put something together. It's not like a movie like you see people moving around and stuff like a normal movie, but this presentation with some medieval style music or what have you. I did my best to, in respect of St. George Day, because it's also the saint I chose when I was baptized and confirmed. So I hope you all like it. Hopefully, before I get to be too old, I will be able to get up there, because I do have intentions of being in some movies and getting my spin-off movie scripts published and put out there. So Godspeed and bless each and every one over in the UK and England, and pray that you all are doing well.